Okay, I want to introduce Tracy Rand. Tracy is a fitness instructor and personal consultant, as well as the owner of Fit to Age. She has been in the fitness industry since 1995, teaching all levels from very fit, like boot camps, to people confined to a chair with severe mobility issues. She decided to specialize in aging adults as it became more apparent to her the importance of strength and balance to keep us living independently as we get older. Her purpose was very personal to start, just to help her grandmother living in her own home for as long as possible, from where she came across the Canadian Centre for Activity and Aging. They're all about aging with dignity. And this is where she began to get passionate about informing people of what can be done to meet and reverse many of the effects of aging. She learned that we can build back muscle at any age, and a study of a 96-year-old lady who gained 120% of her body strength back after only just 8 weeks. Increased energy levels, mood changes, reduction in pain, stronger, more confident, better balance. In some cases, people lose their canes or walkers and even come off oxygen. There can be less need for medication. Symptoms of chronic illness can be reduced and in some cases disappear. She has quite a number of clients that tell her that they are better now than they were 10 years ago when she first met them, which sounds kind of like turning back the clock. And Tracy has kindly spent a bunch of time in the last week or so figuring out about neuropathy and how it all applies to the work that she does. And so she's going to share that with us today. Hey, Tracy.
I'd like to thank you both, Louise and Linda, for asking me to participate. I sort of feel a little confined with the way things are right now, and I loved being in a group environment and just sharing information, because I feel it's really only important if you can share it. When I had started to live with my grandmother and noticing how little tasks that she did daily, which we take for granted, were a lot of work, and getting out of her chair, certain little things. And she had severe arthritis. So she said, if you think I'm going to do squats and lunges, you know, you really truly are out of your mind. So I started trying to study the science of muscle, and exercise really just means lengthening and shortening of muscles. It's how the body delivers oxygen, nutrition, and you can build muscle by doing small little movements. So when I became interested in the Canadian Centre for Activity and Aging, they had what was called the Home Support Exercise Program, designed to be done at home for people who were suffering from mobility issues, whether it was being able to drive or limited energy. From there, when we started sharing the program, people were saying, well, I'm not doing them by myself. So I started teaching it in my class, and that's the format that I follow. They had 3 levels. There's lying down exercises that can be done for if you have pain in your back, or maybe it's respiratory issues, and they will get you to the level where you could sit. And you could do a whole series of exercises sitting that will give you the strength to be able to be mobile on your feet. So it's referred to as the tiered exercise program. I feel that it's important for a lot of people to be informed, especially as we're aging and now we are on a lockdown, the gyms are closed. There's a concern of the amount of deterioration in energy for a lot of seniors, because they are protected and they're not getting out to do their grocery shopping and those little things here and there.
Yes. I always forget this.
Yeah.
For anybody who has any questions, there is the chat box, and Louise and I will both be monitoring the chat box. And so if you have questions, you can type them in there, and we'll stop at an appropriate time that works for Tracy to ask your question. on your behalf.
Oh, sure.
All right,
Thanks.
go ahead.
Yeah. And so when I went to one of the last seminars that was out in London, Ontario, it was really exciting to see because they've got a very active older population, and it doesn't seem that Alberta or even BC has carried on that same level of information. So we get a lot of cold winters here. People are more on lockdown, the fear of falling, our cardiorespiratory deteriorates, and walking is wonderful for those people that have no problems walking. A lot of people will mention, I don't walk fast enough because I'm afraid of falling, to get my heart rate up fast enough to feel that I'm getting a cardiovascular exercise. So I thought that that needs to be addressed as well. And little things like getting your arms going. There's chair exercises that if you decide to do them with a bit of intensity, you can get up to that heart rate and start to see improvements in your cardiorespiratory as well as your physical conditioning. So I've got little props that I take into my classes for people who are not able to move as well. And there's these little discs, they're little gliders, and they just slide underneath your feet. Big pieces of equipment, treadmills, bicycles, those things take up a lot of space. They're big, cumbersome. They don't get used as much as what people think that they would use for. So if I could make a little place in my house where I could just get myself moving more often, but getting out of your chair every 15 minutes has a greater impact on physical conditioning than just doing nothing. I can't be the only one that over this says I should be doing something. So I was fortunate. I came across a book that was called Sitting Kills and Moving Heals. And this lady, Joan Vernikos, she was the director of the body science division of NASA. And I was fortunate enough to meet her last November, and we had a wonderful conversation about the impact. Sitting is just like the new smoking. And if you get up out of your chair every 15 minutes for only 90 seconds, it has a real change, and your body sort of believes that it's still standing for about another 30 minutes. I lived with my father for the last years of his life, and he was dealing with respiratory. My family won't exercise, but I said, could you get out of your chair every 15 minutes? He lost 70 pounds in a year, and his lungs improved so much that they turned his air from 3 liters down to 1. That was my personal witness and experience of that this must really work. So I started getting into more every 15 minutes, every half hour. Could we get out of our chair, walk around the house, maybe just go outside when the weather is nice enough. Mm-hmm. From there, I started getting him into more physical little activities that he loved to do, playing around the house. And then I came across other little bits of props here and there. There's a little sit disc. So could we actively sit? Became my next question, instead of just sitting in a chair that we collapse, because then the core gets very weak, and a lot of our pain from our back will be because of the compression of our vertebrae, which is where all of our nerves are. So now we get into peripheral and diabetes, or neuropathy, sorry, diabetes, and a lot of those conditions have a similar impact of nerve damage. And a nerve heals very slowly, providing you don't injure it each time. So working within a small scope, just flexibility, just moving your fingers, moving your ankles, rotating your ankles while we're watching TV will stimulate the muscles that we rely most on for balance. And if you don't have the feeling in your feet, you're going to need to rely more on your other 2 senses for balance, which are your inner ear and also your vision. So when one sense atrophies a little bit, the brain actually will overdevelop other areas. So they become stronger, but you would need to train them as well. So just standing unassisted is now classified a physical activity, and it is balance. So as long as I'm able to stand, the closer my feet are together, it's more of a challenge. And so it can be as simple, just as simple as that. Where can I start?
You know, that's one of the things I tell my dad, because if we're out shopping, when we're out shopping, I'll say, Dad, because he'll try and put on a shirt or something, right? I'll say, spread your feet a little bit further apart and you'll have better balance, and because he really can't lift his hands off of the walker unless he's got something to hold on to. But you can't put a shirt on if you're doing that, or a jacket.
Yeah, and what I'm understanding too as well is when we find, well, the astronauts, when they came out, this, I just can't say enough, the book Sitting Kills Moving Heals, and she talks through it about when the astronauts came off the shuttle, that they actually walked like they were very bow-legged, because that's the way the brain knows that my balance is better. So just starting to stand more erect, holding ourselves, but posture is an endurance activity. So the core muscles, a lot of people that are my seniors are very familiar with the book, the 5BX book, which was put out by the Royal Canadian Air Force. And you can actually go online and you can Google it. And it's 5 basic exercises that were designed to reach optimum fitness levels with only 11 minutes a day. And there is no props. There's, you are just, it's the equipment that you carry with you every day. And it starts, there's a level for a 6-year-old child. We were all designed to be able to at least get ourselves to safety and get ourselves out of harm's way. Lifting your head off the pillow to look at your toes in the morning is the best core exercise, and to be able to hold it there for 60 seconds is the very, very start. Then they talk about rolling over in bed. So there's little things that we could be doing that really have a wonderful impact, and those are the muscles that will support you through your posture, and that in turn will allow you to breathe more efficiently. So if we can regain that good, strong posture, it takes me back to, I have a little Pilates ball that when I would take to my classes. And if you just put it into the small of your back when you're sitting, and it forces the spine into an erect position, it's more neutral for the neck and the shoulders. So it could be a pain relieving position until the muscles get strong enough. So the props could be used as a starting point. And a lot of this stuff, if you are looking Fitter First, is a wonderful store that carries all my, I could call them sort of my adult toys. Little ways, because you are going to have to find a way to, I think, motivate yourself. We want a quality of life. We want pain-free is a really big factor.
Well, and with core, it's so important when you're talking about people who are at risk of falling, because that whole core strength can really help you recover and change a complete fall into just a stumble, because your whole core compensates. It has the muscles to do that and prevents you from falling down.
Yes, when I worked with the health region, I feel very fortunate. I spent 10 years with them, and we took the falls training, so preventing falls, and they say that actually 80% of hip fractures come from a sideways fall. So feeling confident about stepping out to the side, again, back to the core. If you can tighten through the core, that's your sort of your center of gravity. Your base of support being your feet. So starting even with foot exercises, we've sort of all seen where you, I don't know if you've ever seen you wiggle and scrunch a towel up underneath your toes, and then you take it and you push the towel back out again. And that will actually start to get the calf muscles working. when you don't have a sensation that you can feel, you really have to have more of a visual, because you've got to see if your body is moving it. And then we get into a neurotransmitter communication, because you could, if you don't see your reflection, you may think you're doing things right, but unless your brain actually starts to see that it doesn't look the same as what somebody else is doing, you think it's right, but it's not. So I've had to learn, having a nerve injury myself and going through the journey, I took for granted being able to hold a pen or a pencil. And I understood at that point that without the nerve, the muscle won't respond. So you're going to have to really start to go back, I guess, to really the basics of having no muscle control.
You know what? It's funny that you did this one, because this is an exercise that I do every day, because I am losing sensation in my hands and I drop stuff like crazy. It makes me nuts. But so I do this to build the muscles in my hands. And then I also have ones that I do with an elastic band. I don't do those as often as I should, but
yeah. That's, and I always figure that because I just really, this is my thing, and I just love to read and figure that stuff out. A lot of what happens in our hands, because this muscle is more dominant, is the claw shape. So spending a lot of time in long-term care centers, I used to walk through and think that, you know, is there something these people could be doing? And the body will start to take a form of, it will give into the strong dominant muscles. So we've got a series of tightness through the chest, the wrists, the neck, the hip flexors that pull your knees to your chest, your Achilles tendons. I did my own research. I thought, what if we strengthen the muscles that oppose those dominant muscles, and we work at trying to stretch the muscles to make them more flexible, that are pulling us through that way. And the more studies that well, I consider my participants my case studies, because they'll come up and tell me amazing things that are changes that that touch my heart. Everything from being able to touch the fingers together, to be able to recover from falls, to be able to actually go on a trip to Peru and climbing up into the mountains. And so I've really inspired, getting older, thinking, you know, maybe I could get better. Maybe I could have hope that this isn't going to be.
I have a question for you. This is just one of those things that I came up with in my own mind, but I did notice that when I sleep at night, my hands, both of them sort of form like this. And because I've seen Sylvia, our president, and she has one that's permanently like this, I think, you know, the muscles must be shortening, and so they want to go into that position.
Yeah.
So I've taken to like sliding my hand under a pillow beside me, or under my head, so that my hands are straightened out, to help stretch out those small muscles in my hand. Of course, once I go to sleep, all bets are off, but I feel like it helps to you know, slow down that progression into the shortening of those muscles. Is that a reasonable thing, or am I deluding?
Yeah, I actually, because when I when I was quite young, I worked a lot of factory jobs, and I ended up having oh geez, it slipped my mind right now, carpal tunnel. And so at that time, they would always have braces that they would basically try to keep your hand straight from that. So I ended up going through the surgery and saw instant relief. But that was when I started really noticing too, is nerves, because you have no sensation. And when you're dropping and you're clumsy, and then from there, if you're using a walker or a cane to walk with and you can't have your grip, you can't feel it, everything is kind of connected. So we're so resilient, but yet so delicate in other ways. So if I don't use one body part for a while, the whole system will suffer from that lack of movement there. And that's just a great approach. It's our own figure out. And when you're opening your fingers with the elastic, Linda, I started doing some of that, because a lot of a lot of ladies will, I don't know where I put my elastic, but a lot of ladies, when they do a lot of knitting and crocheting. So of course, this is the position, you got to take a break every so often. So in my class all classes that I teach, I really focus on the weaker muscles, and then I really work at releasing the over dominant, the tight ones, to create a balance. And a joint has the most amount of strength from the best alignment, and a muscle actually has its most amount of power from how long and short you can make it. So if the movement is small, you won't have the same power. So range of motion goes so much further than how hard, how many repetitions should I do, how long a duration should the exercise be. And those are movements that can be done through your whole day continuously if you have maybe little notes or the exercise sheets, which I'm glad to share with you. I'll give you the information that I've acquired,
Yeah.
because I want to spread the word.
I know I've told people who come to our things before, I do things like filling in, I call it filling in the bits. So, you know, sitting at a red light, I'll do a deep breathing exercise. Waiting for my tea, the kettle to get hot, I'll go up on the toes and down, up on the toes.
Perfect.
And do these little tiny exercises, or not this, maybe the scrunching of the toes, but the scrunching of the arch, which is really hard to do. It's very much a mental exercise. But doing those, even if you can't find a whole block of time in the day, you know, try to do that 3 times a week or however often. But you know, those other days I try to find those little bits through the day where I can just slip stuff in. I do these in the shower every day as I'm standing on one foot.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. When I started, because I mean, there's so much science. I was exercising when I was young for vanity, and then it became more for chronic pain. So I did things to my body, working really hard. If you want to wreck your body, just race against a machine on an assembly line, and you know there is no, it's relentless. It just goes and goes. And so I'd end up having certain issues, and learning how to manage that on my own. But your shower is a wonderful place. I mean, you get up there and just get moving, starting something gentle in the morning and getting the shoulders moving, because that's how the whole system responds to the stimuli of movement, and we are really designed to move. So this lady Joan Vernikos, she came out with, of course, there's another book called That's Designed to Move. So and when I showed up, I felt so funny because I said, I have all your books. And so she signed my books for me, and she was the neatest lady. She was about 85 years old, just this tiny thing. So we talked about the astronauts when they came back from space. So she worked personally with John Glenn, and I'm a little bit of a researcher, so I was just so excited to spend some time and ask her questions. And when she mentioned that when seniors came back from, or pardon me, when one of the last shuttles that went up, John Glenn was in his late 70s, and he went up with the 40-year-old astronauts. They were at the same fitness level when they left Earth, and in 6 months when they came back, they were all had lost the same amount of muscle, and they had every symptom of every chronic illness that there is. And in her book, she's got a list of all the things from incontinence to muscle loss to diabetes, arthritis, all of these things. And within 1 year of just getting back to the regular routine, John Glenn included, they all were where they were before they stopped, before they went to space. Sitting is just like being in space. We think gravity is our enemy, but gravity truly is our friend. And if you learn how to come onto your toes and little things like that, that's your real muscle.
I should say one of the reasons I do it in the shower is because I have a safety bar in there that I can grab.
Yeah.
So I'm not recommending people do this in their shower. You got to have things that you can hang on to.
One thing I did learn about when I was reading into this chapter about the things that happen with neuropathy is I didn't realize that the pads in our feet, and also aging feet, also we tend to lose those pads anyways. But so walking, sometimes when you're striking the heel on the ground, which could be really incredibly painful, or you've got dropped foot. So if the toe slaps before the heel, there's an alignment. So it's about the technique of our gait. So these ideas, when people are saying, well, I've got my 10,000 steps. Well, were they good quality steps, or were they just steps? So you're really better off to go for the same length of time for a walk, understand it's a good strong gait, focusing on the alignment. A lot of what goes on in our feet stems from some weak muscles in our hips. So there's muscles that actually put us into correct alignment through our hips. And the 3 hip exercises that I teach have been shown to reduce hip fractures up to 70%. And hip fractures right now, I'm hearing so much, and it's inactivity. Muscle wasting happens really fast. Ladies after the age of menopause, it's 1 pound of muscle loss a year if you don't decide to find a way to address that.
So we have a comment from Ron, who's one of our frequent flyers. He's been trying to walk as per the Gohale method, using engaging the glutes, but was getting nowhere. A few days ago, it hit me to stand on one leg for about 20 seconds, and then finally my glutes were activated. My walk speed,
okay,
wait a minute, I'm losing it, went up about 20%. So the Gohale method, I have that book. Actually, I lent it to somebody, but she's very much about how we don't walk properly in North America. We do this kind of pounding walk, and if you see people from other countries, they do more of a glide where they're putting their foot down heel toe, and then they're pushing off with the heels, or with the toes, or the pads of the feet, and then they're also engaging their glutes. So it's the whole backs of the legs instead of just clomping along, which is what a lot of North Americans do.
It's great that Ron says that, because I watch people, and especially from my window, I watch people walk down the sidewalk. Most people are really distracted. They're on their devices. I just hate to say it, but so you're moving. You didn't really go for a walk, but the hamstring has a really important part of the alignment. So when your heel strikes the ground first, there's a signal that travels at about 200 miles an hour, and it sends a signal to the hamstring of where the knee should be placed. So when you transfer your weight, we're in correct alignment. However, if the hamstring isn't developed enough, so if you're doing seated hamstring exercises, and at the end, I had mentioned to Linda and Louise that I'd love to do a demonstration of a few exercises that can just be done from a chair, which, since most of us are probably sitting more than we really should be, but could I be doing things that will have an impact on the way that I walk? One thing, most people are weak in the front of our shin. So you walk along and then you start stumbling. Well, maybe it's an indicator that you should sit down to take a rest, to let that muscle take a bit of a rest so it's ready to kind of play again with the other ones, because you've got weak areas, you've got strong areas. So everybody thinks it's just like I'm on a mission and I'm walking for my 10,000 steps. But if you're starting to trip and stumble and at risk of falling or getting hurt, maybe it's worth considering, and you could take a rest. And
we have a question from Stephen, wondering if you have any specific exercises for stretching our feet and ankles that would be beneficial. So exercises versus stretching. So
yes, yeah. And one thing I'll mention, that I do have some stretches, because if you pull your toes up, so if you're tapping your toes, you want to be able to lift. If your foot is underneath your knee, you should be able to lift your foot up enough to get the ball of your foot up. But if your calf muscle has atrophied, which of course weakened too much, it won't be as flexible. So I take everything to the kitchen. If you've ever worked with bread dough, if you have a little tiny bit of dough, you're not going to get the same stretch and yield. If you have a bigger amount of dough, you'll get it to stretch. So muscle is sort of like that. So if it's very, very thin, it can't release without tearing or detaching from the bone. So we could start with flexibility, but we really do have to address the strength, so you can build more muscle fiber or more muscle tissues and fibers, which in turn makes more veins and more arteries and delivers more oxygen to those tissues. But if I'm just sitting, one of my that I really enjoy the most is if I've got my feet out in front of me, curling your toes up. Can I reach down and pull my toes up? Uh, Trimming our toenails has become a real serious thing right now. I have a lot of seniors who have been saying to me, my toenails didn't get the message about COVID, and it's been 4 months since I've had my toenails trimmed. They're hard. I can't get to them myself. Now you've got a series of foot cankers or all kinds of foot pain, but also sores that could be potentially high risk to gangrenous. So being able to bend over and check your feet, especially if it's your feet that are numb, we should be able to check out and assess our own feet if we're on our own.
Okay, so do you have other exercises for your feet? That
well, my one recommendation is to do your ankle pump. So you point your toes and then you try to pull your toes up. And the more you practice, but if you can hold the toes curled up a little bit longer, if I'm standing, I think we've all seen the runner stretch where you take a long step and you stretch out that Achilles tendon. That's probably one of the best ones. The approach to that would be you start gentle. And if the muscle is shaking and it's trembling a little bit, it's just generally the indicator that we're not quite ready to go to the next level. If you do some deep nasal breathing to help dilate the blood vessels, you may see a slight progression. So holding your stretch longer than maybe 30 seconds, the new normal is 60, and more frequent will be another thing that will show you a great benefit. Rotations of your ankles, the same idea, because the muscles that made your joints move are your balance muscles, and it starts in the calf. So heel raises, you could do toe raises, but in turn the runner stretch is probably one of the better ones, but no more bouncing. The ballistic approach and the dynamic, it's just a progressive. When it's ready, it'll tell you and it will release to another level.
Yeah, and bouncing I've heard is really hard on them, and you can tear stuff doing bouncing.
Yeah.
You're not paying much attention.
Yeah, that left with the 80s with the headbands and the leg warmers and the
I saw somebody wearing those the other day. So Louise is asking about a book with diagrams that you can recommend for exercises. I have a sheet that I'll put out with everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
With everybody, and
Great.
You said you have a sheet as well.
I actually, and sometimes you can go online, but of course I don't really trust a lot that's online, but you can go to an arthritis site. But if you've got some too as well, Linda, I'm always interested. I take in all kinds of different different things. But the idea, the one about curling your toes and putting maybe a tea towel down, because it's not as bulky, and your heel on the end of the tea towel, and then using your toes to scrunch. And if you can get those toes to curl under, that's going to prevent the arch falling. There's a muscle in the side of the hip called the gluteus medius, which is actually responsible for preventing the arches from falling. So I picked the exercises that were really most beneficial, that when I started to study the hip joint, and I would invite anybody to join the Monday class for the next month. It's running free of charge. It's Monday morning at 11 o'clock, and I'll share some of those things, but we don't take our shoes off. But also the important part is when you've got that ball of towel underneath, is now taking your toes and pushing that towel back out again. So it's going to work the muscles that are on the top of your feet as well, that will support your arch or your instep.
So another one, I was in a yoga class a couple of months ago. When I first got diagnosed with neuropathy, I went to an athletic therapist, and she told me basically to do that and to move my toes. And I was very dismayed for when I tried. I couldn't even move my toes. I didn't realize, because I never would try this, to move my toes. And so now I can move them. I can do that scrunching motion. But at this yoga class that I went to a couple of weeks ago, they were suggesting, or she was, that you move one at a time, right? Move one
Yeah.
toe at a time. Well, I can move the big one and I can kind of move the next one, but the other ones, they all move as a unit. And so those are kind of interesting exercises, I think, that are, again, very much in the mind.
Yeah.
But if people can learn to do those simple little movements and even just spreading the toes.
Yeah. And that's the big message is my one thing is, as long as you've got the power of your brain, as long as you've got the power of your own thought and you can make things make sense, you can probably manage your own routine, and you can literally do one exercise an hour and still get the benefits. So this idea that you've got to go and it's got to be 20 minutes, and every so often I have a hard time erasing that from my mind, saying, okay, well, I've got to pedal my stationary bike. I've got to do it for 10 minutes. And then I think, well, what if I just start with 5? And I say one of my favorite things is dancing. Put on some music that makes you feel that there's a tempo that you want to keep time with. It's balance and it's coordination. Even if you're holding on to something, you could dance with your walker, you could dance at the kitchen sink, you can step side to side. But if I practice with the rhythm of the music, my step might be a little bit quicker. And it will be disguising your exercise so it doesn't feel quite the same. So my prescription for everybody is dance for 5 minutes every day and dance like nobody's watching. And
even if it's in your chair, right? You can still just
yeah. And I have a
that
girl
action of tapping your toes to get that whole ankle movement.
Yeah, actually, do you know when Ron was, I think that was asking, is absolutely play music. And even if music is playing in the background, use the rhythm of something like that and tap your toes. Tap it to the rhythm of music. Tap because you're frustrated, you're waiting in line up, and tap, 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 tap. And when we're talking about balance, even standing and shifting your weight from foot to foot, if you're forced, because everywhere we are now, there's a lineup, it seems, everywhere. So could I utilize that time, which I feel is a waste of my time, but could I decide to practice balance? Could I let go of my cart and get my feet a little closer? Could I look over my shoulder from side to side and see what's in somebody's cart, or or the candy bar section, or and looking up around. But the hardest thing on our feet actually is standing fixed in one spot.
Yes. I find that with my neuropathy, I almost never am just standing. I'm quite often doing the sway, because if I stand still, it's not possible.
Yeah. Well, when people say, well, quit swaying like you're holding a baby, I'll say, if you start doing that kind of a little bit of a sway, sometimes it's infectious and people just start to do it. If you lead by example, if I'm watching television, I could stand for a couple of minutes. It wouldn't, but we just don't seem to think about that.
It comes back to proprioception, though, right? You're being able to know where your body is in space, because we don't necessarily have this feeling in our feet. And some of us are so bad they can't even feel the ground beneath them, right?
Yeah.
And so making that movement, you're moving muscles which are sending signals.
Yes. I have a lady who's become a very good friend of mine that suffers from severe neuropathy. So I've learned a lot through her as well. And she's a professor, so she's quite scientific in research. And we were talking, she said that she really appreciates the exercises that she learned from some of my classes. She's still living on her own. She's 85 years old. She goes out and does all of her own things. She said, but if I lose my vision, then it's going to be even scarier, or if I have an ear infection. So I really practice balance. I try to stand on one foot here or there. Sometimes 20 seconds might be a little long if the muscles are weak in the hips. So it's about conditioning and getting muscle mass. On an average, we put on, I think, if an exercise program becomes pretty steady in our routine about every 2 weeks, we could possibly put on about 3 pounds of muscle within about 6 months. And I have a base fitness level. So I decided that I'm going to just 10 of everything, my own body resistance, From then on, you can do extra activities if you want, but if you've got your 10 calf raises, Linda, you know, maybe you've got, and then you do some toe raises. If you're going to do calf raises, quickly do your toe raises so that you don't forget later and you're always doing calf raises, so that doesn't become the dominant muscle as much.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So we have about 15 minutes left. Did you want to try and do some demonstrations?
Yeah, I mean, if everybody's, I would just ask everybody, make sure that you grab a drink of water, and it's probably time for us to, if I'll move into, I've got sort of a little studio made up in my living room, and I'd like to just be able to show some of the exercises, and I'll send them off to you, Linda, so that, you know, where do you start? How do we start? Well, if you've got a seed planted, then maybe, yeah, you can water the seed. And my computer does a funny little thing when I disconnect it from its power source.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so here I'm just gonna set up into this situation here. Let's see, here's my little, I think we were all making home offices and home studios. And I'm just gonna grab two of my props here.
So I encourage anybody, I know you won't necessarily have the props, but give it a try, whatever Tracy's.
Well, and when I was talking about the ball, at least if I show you, you know, if I'm sitting in the chair, I gave a presentation for CARP twice, actually, the Canadian Association for Retired Persons. I love just going in and experimenting. So I just handed everybody a ball and I just watch, because people will start to, you know, transfer it back and forth. If I'm squeezing, there's your hand exercises. But if it's just in the small of your back, so that it forces you to sit up tall. Or you've got the little sit disc that I had mentioned before. And if you get a hold of Linda, we can find ways to get this stuff to you. It's filled with air, so it forces me to keep myself, okay, a little bit more in the center from falling out of my chair. But if I decide, yes,
Tracy,
Linda?
can you speak up just a little bit and maybe slow down just a little bit?
Sure, sure. So if I'm just sitting in my chair, let's start with just some basic, and I want to just straighten one leg and bend the other leg. I'll move the ball just because I want to be able to turn and show you. The most important muscle to remain independent in our homes and living, free, making our own decisions, is just leg extensions. It's the fastest deteriorating muscle in the body, and it is the most responsible for mobility. So getting out of your chair, in and out of your car, up and down stairs, most importantly, off the toilet. So if I straighten and bend, I could just make it as simple as, if I wanted to do them all in a row on one side and make the muscle fatigue, but it corrects the tracking of the kneecap. When that muscle deteriorates, it doesn't deteriorate all at the same time. The inner thigh muscle actually gets weaker faster, and it's the one that aligns the kneecap. So if I had to start with just a few exercises, if you need to rest your arms on your chair, but holding yourself tall and straighten and bend. The opposite to this here would be dragging your shoe on the floor, which this is the perfect one to strengthen the hamstring when we were talking about the gait pattern, the strike of the heel on the ground. So if I sit forward on the chair and you push your toe and your heel in the ground, and imagine you're scraping a big piece of chewing gum off of your shoe on the concrete, and you keep that foot underneath your thigh. And so I know that I'm good in my alignment, which is what keeps the knee a lot safer, and push back again into. If you have carpet under your feet, it's going to change the intensity. And if I take it 3, I giggle when I come in from outside. Wipe your feet off, wipe your shoes off. It activates them all. I'll do 2 more. I'll just do some 5s. And I want to be able to feel that muscle. You've got a better range of motion if you don't have your body weight on the joint. So that power that you get from your muscle, if I do it without any resistance or any weight, I'll be a lot less likely to hurt myself. Keep this foot, drag it back. And I won't get out of breath. If I have very limited energy, there's going to be some days where you don't have good energy. And take this back and think about triangle, 3, and back. And if I think sitting tall, and 4, and back, and 5. Excellent. And then if I get into the calves, because you're mentioning, Linda, when you're standing in the shower, but you get a better range of motion, or if you're not standing. So if I bring my heels up, your first 5 are a real engagement of neuropathic transmitters. So the muscles and the brain talking together. And if I know, and then the opposite would be your toe raises. So tapping your heels to music. Could I go side to side? Sure, like you were a skier. If you want to be dancing in your chair, your body, your upper body moves and demands a lot more oxygen, and the toes come up. And this is the one where I was mentioning, it might be just the start to get your toes. And if I just keep working, and I keep working at it, to be able to get the ball of your foot off the floor, and take this again, and we'll just do about 2 more. And that last one here. And the little discs you could use, one lady said she has a set of pot holders. And if you would just, and I always encourage you to keep drinking water. But if I'm moving my legs, which I love it because I did one very focused and thinking about it. But if I was just sitting in my chair and I was watching television, or if you were doing some knitting, or you were sitting at the computer, they've got hardwood, which is the fabric. They also have ones for carpet, plastic plates, paper plates. Okay, if you've got something that slides rags from here, then I could just keep those muscles activated, and there's your hamstring. From here, I could drag my legs out to the side. There's your muscles, okay, that strengthen the hips out to the side. More body parts if I decided to chair dance. I have one of my fellow co-workers that was teaching a chair dancing class, and she said, boy, it's just taken off. It's keeping time to music. If I go higher, then I'm going to need more oxygen, and there's my cardio attachment to the exercise. So everything can be done with the cardio behind it. If there's no chance of falling, then I might be a little braver to be doing something like that. Okay. But the flexibility, because we've got a whole series of stuff with that upper body too as well. But the flexibility would be, if I have my leg straight out down on the floor and I pull my toes up, I always prefer to bring it up onto a footstool and hinging from the hips. But if the hamstrings aren't very strong and we've lost a lot of muscle, then I might not be able to bend freely from the hips. My gauge is just to be able to get to the toes, but feeling that stretch. And in turn, taking a band, or have we seen a towel? And this is probably something, Linda, you were sort of talking about. If I have something that I can sit up nice and tall and I can work at that, I could point and pull and work those muscles. And then I would switch to the other side. One leg, always safety, and that other leg straight out in front. It's sitting nice and tall. If you put your weight here and breathing, we know slow and steady wins the race. Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't think, I need to trim my toenails tomorrow. I think I'll do stretching today. It's a progressive thing. And slowly you work towards that goal. And from there, okay. If I was thinking about doing some upper body exercises, I would just start basic, bring the shoulders straight up and then straight down, and just some shrugs. Tall posture, good breath, squeeze up and back down. Consciously pushing more on to the down, as if you were pushing yourself off the edge of your bed or pushing yourself out of a chair. This is a very typical area of tightness. Okay, we are in pain, we're stressed out, and all of those muscles tighten in around the head if I go forward and backwards. And that's the basic, okay, of the way the body is designed to work. The shoulders don't push through pain. Yeah. If you say, I'm going to push through and it's going to get better, it's going to actually go the opposite way and pull back. And if I'm thinking about opening my fingers, see, Linda, I sort of added that and make a fist back. A warm-up is really just joint specific. If you've been sitting for a period of time, I'm just going to say, your TV program, I'm going to get up. I know that the commercial is coming. The break is going to come. Start setting it up for success. I could get the heels going. I could move the ankles. I can get the knees working, the hips. And when I get onto my feet, my body is just a little bit more prepared for what's next. One of the science of sitting too long is if your bum is sore, don't lie down. If your bum is sore and somebody says, if I sit too long, it hurts. Getting up out of your chair. And every 15 minutes, if I just think about getting up, if you have to pull yourself up on something and you pull yourself up. And are we okay for a few more minutes, Linda?
Yeah, we may have people drop off as we get to the top of the hour.
Okay.
But
I just wanted to just sort of give an indication, because there's the 3 exercises that reduce the hip fractures by 70%. And so if it's just stepping back, okay, from here, and then if I step out to the side from here, and that could be transfer of weight. I do some side steps. I'm not too at risk because I've got something to hold on to. Okay. And then the real sneaky one, which really helps support the feet, and this is my favorite I love to share, is if you lift one toe and I turn the toe out to the side, that's the gluteus medius. That is the one that cascades through and helps support the inner arch of the feet. If I look down, I see that my feet are in a V. That's the beginning. If I take it just a back step, and the steps are small, just the length of your own foot, and then I step out. I recommend 5. Quit while you're ahead. Yeah. And
we have another question from Ron.
Sure.
My right shoulder is weak and a bit frozen and painful nerves, etc. On reach over last few weeks. Any recommendations for that?
Well, a lot of what goes on through the shoulder, that's one of my courses that was post-rehab stroke. That lower part of the back, Ron, it really forces you into this position where it pulls everything together. And it's about alignment before we start going, okay, I'm going to try to reach up. I just want to share, this is an experiment I love. So you sit up nice and tall and sort of over exaggerate your posture like you were looking up over a crowd. And then I feel that I can move my neck a little freer. The shoulder, you just try it. I could assist it. So I could take the one good arm and say to the, come on, you take it up and you take it down. But if I slouch, okay, now you eliminated that posture, that little curve in your back. And then now if you try to look over your shoulder, you feel everything is kind of compressed in your neck. And now the shoulder doesn't really work well. So all the time going back to posture, you wake up in the morning and just the triangles under your feet, big toe, little toe, heel, even if you can't feel it, the thought of it, grounding yourself, and then posture. And it should be the first thing we think of instead of, I start to do my exercises, set your posture, do as many as you can. And when those muscles are tired, then you would just take a rest. The ball, if you have a cushion, if you've got it doesn't have to be a Pilates ball. And if you just put it into the position in your back, you probably will feel a sense of relief back to our core that we were talking about, Linda, is that it is the start of everything. Okay, the beginning of everything every day is into that area here. And I could do stuff lying down too as well, but that would take a whole nother session. Changing my position at least every half hour. If a person who's paralyzed should be completely changed in their position to prevent bad sores, as an able-bodied person, I should maybe consider getting out of my chair and changing my position myself. Does that help a little bit? And it's experiments yourself. When I had my nerve thing, I noticed I seemed to feel most comfortable when I was in this crazy position. It would feel not as painful. When you're in pain, don't just sit in pain. You keep trying to find what's referred to as your sweet spot, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, that's what I was looking for.